Viktor Nordenskiöld, our second guest of honor for today. Viktor is the director of the film Feminister. Thank you very much, Viktor, for joining us, for making a fascinating film, and for allowing us to screen it. Around 250 women and men in Israel watched the film in the last few days, and we received enthusiastic feedback. A friend of mine, Yofi Tirosh, who was until recently the head of the law school in Sapir College, said that in this pessimistic period and frustrating period, the film really lifted her up and encouraged her. So thank you very much for joining us. And I want to start by asking you what inspired you to create this documentary, and what was your first reaction when you heard of a feminist foreign policy?
Well, I came from, I'm a documentary filmmaker, but I came from being an international news reporter. So of course, first of all, actually, I wanted to make a movie about a foreign minister. That's how it actually started. But then the first day, Margot said, I want to declare a feminist foreign policies. And then, of course, it became even more interesting. So, I mean, that's one thing led to the other, you could say.
And what did it sound reasonable? Did it sound weird?
No, it sounded very reasonable and very interesting. Because I mean, I agree, of course, that the point of it that we, I mean, equality is the main point of it, and also that it's not that women are better than men, but we're all equal. We should have the same opportunities, same obligations, same rights. That's very basic, I think. So that's something very understandable. So I think it was very interesting to see also what happened to the declaration.
Yeah. So before I'll continue to my next question, I want to remind the audience that you can all send questions, write questions in Hebrew or in English in the chat to Viktor. So Viktor, I wanted to ask you, do you think that your perspective as a man impacted the outcome of the film? Or in other words, do you think that if you were a woman filmmaker, the film would have looked entirely different?
I don't know, it would have been entirely different, but of course, I think it would be different. I mean, I am who I am. I cannot change who I am, I think. So even though I think I'm a feminist, I'm still a man. So of course, I think it would be different. But also it'd be different because you're a different person. So it's hard to say exactly. But of course, I mean, sure. I mean, it would be strange otherwise, I think, if we, but also I used, of course, because I was a man, I also used many women editors in the movie to help me also to have a sort of a perspective in that biological way as well.
I heard many Swedish men declaring themselves as feminist men. I wonder, what do you drink? What do you have in your water? But this is not my question, although you can answer that too. I wanted to ask you about the name of the film. Feminism is a word that often intimidates people. And by naming the film Feminister, did you have any fears of negative effect? And do you have numbers of how many women compared to men watched the film? And did you notice a difference in response from each gender?
First, but how many men are calling themselves feminists? But I think it's that the word is not so that strong in Sweden, maybe as I mean, a different value in the word where you go, I think. So I think you can actually be that without, I mean, but of course, somewhere, and it's still also in Sweden, maybe it's still controversial, I'm not really sure, but the name, the Feminister, was my friend Malcolm Dexelius actually who came up with the title, because that was very but directly, of course, that's a perfect title. But it's maybe it's the same as the feminist foreign policy, because actually it's also a title that says something, and it's a play with words, and it says something, and I think it tells the whole story somehow. So I was not afraid. I thought it was brilliant directly. Then it's something to have a punchline, so to speak. And if it but I think it was a little bit different reactions from men and women when seeing the film. I think the reviews, the papers, there were more positive women and less positive men, I think, sometimes. So I think there's different. Yeah. But I don't have any statistics about it. No, I don't have any statistical examples, but I just have this feeling that there was more stubborn old men that didn't like it, and then maybe I'm not sure, but there's no statistics.
I must admit that I met you in a screening of the film in real life a few months before the whole COVID-19 ruined our plans, and there were, I think, almost only women in the audience. So this is why I ask you if you know the data about how many women compared to men watched the film.
No, but in other places it has been actually, I don't know, 50-50, but many men. So it hasn't been like only women. No, I don't think that's how it was. But of course, yeah, majority maybe. But I think it's been interesting from many men as well. So yeah. Sure.
I found the language of the film very feministic. You followed the minister closely and intimately, but you don't intrude or pry into her personal issues. And as a viewer, I felt as if I was part of her team and their deliberation with her. Do you feel the same way? Or do you think that it would have looked the same? Actually, the question is, do you think whether it would have looked the same if the minister was a man?
Well, it's so hard to say that. If she was a man, it's hard to, honestly, it's very hard to answer. But the thing, how to do it, I mean, how to portray, that was a feministic way of portraying. And yeah, I think I really want to do a film about a working human being, and the work should be the main thing. And that's also why I think when we actually end up in Margot's home, end up a little bit about private life, that was actually in the end of the film and not in the beginning, because it was very important to show the working person. That was very important. And maybe in some very traditional way of portraying a women leader would be that you choose the personal life first and to go in that direction. But I think I want to do the other way and to make it really sort of the working person first and then the private. And then of course, man, I think that it's always this balance. You should be personal but not private. That's always a good way of thinking, I think. And I think it was also very easy to be personal with Margot Wallström because she actually opened up as well a lot in her, also at work, I think. She, as you said earlier in the interview here, that she showed her close emotions. She let her close emotions show, but then go back to politics. And Margot said that was something that was maybe typical for female leadership, and maybe that is the way. And I mean, that's very visible in the film in a way that you can cry and you can be hard and you can be the whole human being. You can have the whole spectrum. I think that's important. And then I think she really has it, and I think that shows in the film.
Yeah. I have one last question of mine, and then we'll have time for 2 questions from the audience. My last question is actually in the beginning of the film, you're writing, trying to make a difference, knowing that principles have a cost. Were these your fears when you started filming, and what do you think were the costs?
But I think it was more my interpretation of the whole film, I think, or the whole idea of Margot's way of doing her job, I think. I mean, that was the declaration, of course, of the feminist foreign policy, and some other decisions were very with a lot of courage, I think. And of course, if you do that, then of course it's the price to pay. If you try to go against big powers like and say that they don't have a very good feministic rights or women rights, and of course then you can then you get beaten a bit in the beginning. In a way, you get beaten by economic sanctions and so on. So there is a cost, but then you can move on. And of course, in the film also there's a personal cost. Of course, if you are very courageous and do things that not everybody likes, some great powers don't like. Of course, it's also can be stressful, and your personal health can also be at risk. So I think that's both this personal and this work part of it, I think.
Thank you. I want to share 2 questions from the audience. I will ask them together. First, Miri Sharon asks, which scenes that were filmed did you decide to leave out of the movie? Were there any scenes, and why? And second, how do you change personally as a result? How did you change personally as a result of making the movie? Maybe we can start with that, and if we'll have time for one last question afterwards.
Yeah, first, if there were scenes that was left, many scenes were left out. I mean, it was doing a four-year time. There was a lot of filming, I can say. So I don't know in a specific scene that I can really say, but I mean, there was a lot of material that was not in the film. But I mean, it's also because you have to not have the same all the time and so on. So that was a lot of, and especially because we wanted to have the film really from in the order of time, also to show how you change as a person a little bit as a minister. And as a change as a person, of course, I think I changed as well. Of course, I learned a lot more what it's like to be a foreign minister to what it's like to be in the foreign ministry. So I think I changed as well, definitely. And I learned also, because honestly, I didn't know this much about feminism and feminist foreign policy before I made the film. I mean, that's of course something I learned along the way.
Interesting. Last question, because we're a little bit late. From Oran Barir. Thank you for a beautiful film. How do you see your place as a feminist man in the film industry in Sweden? Is it only or mainly by bringing feminist content to the screen, or is there more than that you do in the back office of the film industry?
I don't know exactly, but to be a feminist, but for me, it's also about to care a lot about human rights, of course, in this kind of issues. I don't think it's only feminist, but it's part of it anyway. And that's one thing that I think it's really, really important to really get voices to the people that are not really have the voice all the time. That's very important. And also maybe sometimes also to question the people, the mansplaining people and so on, and to always be in doubt. I think that's very important as a filmmaker and as a person. I think to always think, well, maybe is it really sure, or maybe there is another way to do it. So that's, I think that's an important thing to try to consider different way of seeing things. Yeah, and as Margot said before, I mean, dialogue, to meet people, that's what we all want to do when making a film as well. I mean, your aim is to make a film, and you hope that other people will meet the people I meet, and that there could be a sort of a meeting, like now in this Zoom. We meet sort of in the same way as in the film somehow.
Yes, Viktor. Thank you very much. I must admit that I was also a foreign affairs correspondent and also a documentarist, and I enjoyed it also from all angles, the film, as a documentarist and as an activist in promoting 1325. I think the process you described now about learning about it was fascinating, and I think we saw that in the film. We want to thank you on behalf of all of us and all the almost 200 people in the audience. Thank you very much, and thank you for a beautiful film. By that, we are finishing the first part, the English part of our conference. Thank you very, very much, Viktor.
Thank you. And my just want to say thank you very much for letting me and for showing the film and showing all your engagement in this. It's fantastic. And also actually thank you, Margaret, if she is still there. I think that also, because it's not easy to be a politician, to actually let a filmmaker to film so much anyway, and to open up and to be it demands a bit of courage, I think. So I think it's also her courage that made you all see the work and see how what it's like to be a foreign minister.
Thank you very much, Viktor.